There were 42 white folding chairs set up in perfect rows around the fire pit, and I counted every single one of them. Not because I was bored, though I was, but because it gave me something to focus on while Sabrina forgot I was even there. The evening air smelled like grilled peach and something expensive I couldn't name. Her boss, Marshall Durant, had a backyard straight out of an architecture magazine, minimalist lanterns, sculpted hedges, little signs that told you not to step on the grass, like even the lawn had status here. I was holding a paper plate with shrimp skewers I didn't ask for, standing beside a woman who hadn't looked at me in over 20 minutes. She laughed in a way I hadn't heard in years, a specific, melodic kind of laugh she used to reserve for our old kitchen counter nights, when it was just us, 2 bowls of cereal, and dreams about how we'd make it. Now, she laughed like I wasn't even holding her jacket. Like she didn't arrive with me. Like I wasn't her husband. Sabrina had been different lately. Not cruel. Not distant, exactly. Just recalibrated. As if some invisible scale had tipped, and she was now weighing our life against something shinier, louder, more presentable. The more I faded into her background, the brighter she seemed to glow in everyone else's spotlight. I stayed another half hour. No one spoke to me. When I left, she didn't notice. Not even a glance. But 5 minutes after I stepped off that perfectly lit driveway and into my car, my phone buzzed. Her message said just one word. Come. And that's when I knew this wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a guest pass. One she could revoke, renew, or reprint whenever it suited the party. I sat in my car with the engine running, staring at the word on my phone. Come. Just that. No question mark. No emoji. No context. It sat there like a command, like something halfway between a plea and a dare. For a second, I actually considered turning the car around. Not because I thought she needed me, but because, despite everything, I still wanted to believe I mattered to her. That my absence might have caused even a flicker of discomfort. But deep down, I knew that message wasn't about me. It was about control. She hadn't realized I was gone. Someone else probably had. Maybe Marshall. Maybe one of those executives who saw me as a placeholder rather than a partner. I didn't reply. Instead, I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, my hands on the wheel but my mind stuck in that backyard, still watching her laugh with people whose names she'd never mentioned at home. She used to tell me everything. Not just the big stuff. The little things. The annoying coworker who always reheated fish in the break room. The new intern who thought synergy was a cool word. I hadn't heard a story like that in months. And it wasn't because nothing was happening. It was because, somewhere along the line, I stopped being the person she brought stories home to. When I eventually pulled back into our driveway, her car was already there. That was surprising. She was always the last to leave those events. I stepped inside quietly, more out of habit than caution. Our house smelled like cinnamon. Her favorite candles were lit, which meant she'd gotten home first and tried to make it feel warm. A performance, maybe. Or guilt. She was on the couch with her shoes off, staring at the TV but not watching anything. Just flickers of color bouncing off her face. Her phone was in her hand, screen dimmed. I stood there for a second, and she didn't turn. I don't even know if she heard me come in. For a moment, I felt like a ghost, present but unseen, walking through the home we built like it no longer belonged to me. You left, she finally said, I still fixed on the screen. Flat voice. No emotion. Not even surprise. I did, I replied. My voice cracked a little, not from anger, just fatigue. You didn't seem to notice. That got her attention. She turned her head slowly, the kind of slow that says, let me pretend I'm thinking about how to respond, when in reality, she already knows what she's going to say. I was busy, she said. Networking. It's important. Yeah, I said, placing my keys on the counter. I noticed. The room filled with silence, thick and unsatisfying. She wasn't angry. She wasn't apologetic. Just distant. Like we were 2 neighbors discussing garbage day, not 2 people who'd once planned to grow old on a porch swing somewhere in Maine. I texted you, she added, as if that settled something. I nodded. I know. She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw it in her eyes. She didn't expect me to push back. I never had before. I was the agreeable one, the man who made space, not waves. You didn't reply, she said, voice quieter now. I looked at her and asked, why did you want me to come back? It was the only question that mattered. She hesitated. Too long. The kind of pause that wraps itself around the truth and squeezes it until all that's left is something softer, more digestible. I just didn't like the idea of you being upset. Not, I missed you. Not, I realized you were gone. Just an abstract defense against discomfort. I sat down on the far end of the couch. I didn't want to argue. I wasn't even angry. Just hollow. I didn't want to be there, I admitted. But I came anyway. For you. She didn't answer. And in that moment, sitting 4 feet apart in a house filled with curated coziness, I realized something I hadn't wanted to see. I was showing up for someone who didn't notice when I did, and only reached out when my absence became an inconvenience. That's when I knew this wasn't just about one night at her boss's party. This was the beginning of something I couldn't ignore anymore. For 3 days after the party, nothing was said about it. Not directly. We moved around each other in the house like 2 people in a shared Airbnb, polite but separate. She made coffee in the morning like she always did, 2 mugs, one for her with almond milk, one black for me. She still sent me links to things she thought I'd find interesting, like an article on emotional intelligence or a clip of a rescue dog learning to walk again. But she didn't look me in the eye when she spoke, and I didn't ask her why. I wanted to believe we were just in a rut. That's what people say, right? Long-term relationships go through phases. Maybe we were just in the quiet part before the rebuild. But deep down, I knew better. It wasn't silence that was hurting us. It was the way silence had become comfortable for her. Necessary, even. It took exactly 72 hours for her to bring up the night again. We were sitting at the kitchen table, both of us half focused on our laptops, when she said it. You embarrassed me. It was soft, almost like she didn't want to say it. But it hung in the air with this sharp weight I wasn't ready for. I looked up slowly, unsure I'd heard her right. At Marshall's, she clarified, not even looking up. Just leaving without saying anything. People noticed. There it was. The real issue. Not that I left, but that someone saw me leave. That it might reflect on her. Appearances, they were everything in her world. I let the words sit for a moment before answering. Did it ever occur to you I was embarrassed too? Now she looked at me. Her face didn't twist in anger, it pinched with confusion. Like the idea hadn't even crossed her mind. I stood there, Sab, I said, more gently than I expected. Next to you, invisible. You didn't introduce me. You walked away without a word. I watched you laugh with people I've never even heard you mention. I was just wallpaper. That's not fair, she said, but there was no conviction in it. Just reflex. What would be fair, then? I asked. That I smile and stand still while you forget I exist? She stood up and crossed her arms, her defense posture. You know how important these events are. You know what it means when Marshall invites people into his space. It's not a party, it's a test? I offered. She blinked. What? That's what it felt like. Like I was part of your test. Something to tolerate until the right people saw the right version of your life. She didn't answer. Just walked to the sink and ran water, even though there were no dishes. Just noise. Distraction. Lowell, she said finally, turning back. I didn't mean to hurt you. I don't think you did, I said, standing up too. I just think I don't fit anymore. That made her flinch. Not physically, but internally, I could see the shift. The first crack in the illusion. Because for all her confidence and polish, Sabrina hated change. Hated endings. She wanted everything to look perfect, even if it wasn't. Especially if it wasn't. You're overreacting, she said, voice tight now. We've had a bad week. That doesn't mean anything. Every couple has them. But I wasn't talking about a week. I was talking about years. I just didn't say that yet. Instead, I nodded and left the room. I didn't want to escalate things. That wasn't me. I didn't do drama. I didn't raise my voice or slam doors. I just needed space. Somewhere I could think without feeling like a prop in someone else's curated lifestyle. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to her while she scrolled on her phone, probably looking at photos from the party. Maybe even reposting one with some breezy caption about team bonding or grateful for the best crew. And in the filtered glow of the screen, I could see the faint smile on her lips. She didn't feel what I felt. Not yet. But I did. And the feeling wouldn't go away. The next morning, something small but jarring happened. Her phone lit up while she was in the shower. I didn't mean to look, but it was right there, face down on the kitchen counter when it vibrated. A message preview from a contact named MD. Just 2 words. Thursday confirmed. It could have been anything. A work thing. A meeting. A dinner. But something about it didn't sit right. She never saved people by initials. And she never kept plans from me. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't say a word when she came downstairs in her robe and kissed my forehead like nothing was wrong. But something was wrong. And for the first time in our marriage, I didn't want to explain why. I wanted to find out for myself. I didn't sleep again the next night. I told Sabrina I had a work deadline to meet, which wasn't entirely a lie. I did have a backlog, but that wasn't why I stayed up late, sitting in the guest room with a notebook on my lap and a blank page staring back at me. I wasn't writing anything. I was thinking about that message, about MD, and what Thursday meant. I wasn't the kind of guy who jumped to conclusions. If anything, I usually talked myself out of trusting my instincts. I didn't like conflict. I didn't like how suspicion made me feel itchy inside my own skin. But this felt different. It wasn't just the message. It was the way she moved the phone when I walked into the room. The way she tilted it slightly under her hand. The fact that her lock screen now required facial recognition instead of a simple swipe, which she used to say was too much trouble. She was changing things. Quietly. Carefully. And I was finally starting to notice. On Thursday, I made a decision. I called in sick. First time in years. My boss didn't question it. I built up enough quiet goodwill that nobody pressed me when I said I had a migraine. But I didn't stay home. I waited. Sabrina left the house around 6:10 p.m. She said she had a dinner meeting with the usual crew, vague enough to make it sound routine. She kissed me on the cheek and grabbed her laptop bag, even though she hadn't used that bag in weeks. It was heavier than normal. I know that because I opened the front door for her, and when I reached for it, just instinctively, she held it tighter and said, "I got it." I waited 10 minutes. Then I followed. I felt ridiculous doing it. I even laughed at myself in the car for a minute, muttering things like, "What am I, in a movie now?" But I kept driving. Not close. I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I just wanted answers. The kind you can't get from passive-aggressive texts or awkward dinners where no one talks about the elephant in the room. She didn't go to the restaurant she said she was heading to. In fact, she didn't go anywhere near it. She drove straight through downtown, out past the old mill buildings that had been turned into overpriced lofts, and eventually pulled into the underground garage of the Harrison Hotel. Not a chain. Not a conference venue. Just a high-end, quiet, overpriced boutique place that catered to discretion. I parked 2 blocks away. Sat in the car with the engine off, fingers drumming against the steering wheel, heart thudding hard enough I could feel it in my eardrums. It could still be nothing. Maybe she was meeting Marshall. Maybe it was a last-minute team gathering. But I knew, in the way you just know when something is breaking before it shatters, that it wasn't that. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. I walked. I wasn't sure what I was doing. I didn't want to cause a scene. I wasn't going to confront her in the lobby like some bitter husband on a bad reality show. I just needed to see. To confirm. To stop wondering. I stayed outside the side entrance, across the street where the trees offered enough cover to go unnoticed. At exactly 7:06, I saw her. She stepped out of the elevator into the glass-walled lounge on the second floor, and she wasn't alone. A man, tall, lean, maybe late 40s, stood next to her. They weren't touching. Not yet. But they were close. Too close for business. Too familiar for colleagues. She was laughing again, that laugh she'd once saved for me, but now gave away like loose change to someone I didn't recognize. He leaned in. Said something. She nodded. They walked together toward the corridor. Toward the rooms. And I stood there, across the street, staring up at them like I'd stepped outside my own body. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't take photos or send texts. I just stood still, perfectly still, while a part of me quietly stopped breathing. I didn't know how long I stood there, but by the time I made it back to my car, it was dark. I didn't drive home right away. I sat in the parking lot of a closed coffee shop, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. And I didn't recognize the man looking back at me. I wasn't angry at her. I was ashamed of myself. Ashamed for not noticing sooner. For making excuses. For shrinking in her shadow until I was small enough to be overlooked by everyone, including the woman who once said I made her feel safe. When I finally did get home, it was after 10. I didn't bother turning on the lights. I sat on the edge of the bed, waiting for her like a forgotten ghost. And when I heard the door unlock, soft, careful, like she was trying not to wake me, I didn't move. She stepped into the bedroom and gasped. "Oh, you're up," she said, like it was unexpected. "I couldn't sleep," I replied. "How was dinner?" There was a pause. A beat too long. She lied. Of course she did. Something about how long it ran, how the clients wanted drinks, how Marshall's wife showed up, surprisingly. And I nodded. Because I didn't want to hear her tell the truth. Not yet. Because I wasn't ready to hear what she'd become. Because I wasn't ready to admit what I'd allowed myself to be reduced to. And because, in some broken part of me, I still loved her. even as the world I built around her began to collapse. It's strange how the smallest sounds can hurt the most. That night, it was the jingle of her keys. When she dropped them into the ceramic bowl by the door, the one we picked out together at some craft fair 5 years ago, it was like a bell toll for everything I didn't want to say out loud. Her keys used to be a comforting sound, a sign she was home, safe, ours. But now? Now they just meant she'd returned from somewhere she had no business being, and I wasn't invited. She didn't ask why I was still awake. She didn't ask if something was wrong. She went straight to brushing her teeth, humming to herself like she wasn't covered in the perfume of someone else's attention. When she climbed into bed, she curled away from me, her back tight and still, like the guilt had locked her muscles. I didn't say a word. I just laid there, eyes open in the dark, watching the ceiling and wondering how long I'd keep pretending I didn't know. The next morning was worse. Not because she acted differently, but because she didn't. She made her coffee, added her almond milk, stood by the window checking her calendar. She even asked if I'd remembered to pick up the dry cleaning, like she was reciting lines from the script of a marriage that had ended but didn't want to admit it yet. I watched her the way you watch someone who might vanish if you look away for too long. She wore her blue blouse, the one she said made her feel sharp. Her makeup was light but precise. Her hair was up in that quick, twisted knot that always looked effortless but wasn't. She was polished, glowing, almost like a woman in love, just not with me. She kissed my cheek before heading out the door. I didn't lean in. I didn't return it. And for the first time in a long time, she noticed. "You okay?" she asked. "He's already in hand." "I'm fine," I lied. She hesitated. Just briefly. Like her intuition wanted to say something her mouth didn't dare voice. But then she smiled, not the real one, the polite one, and said, "I'll see you tonight." I nodded. But I didn't say goodbye. When the door closed, I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the spot she'd been standing. I tried to picture who she was meeting that night, what they would talk about. If she laughed with him like she used to laugh with me. If she told him the things she used to whisper to me when no one was listening, secrets, thoughts, dreams she said only I would understand. I wondered if she called him by a nickname. If he knew she hated cilantro. If he knew about the scar on her left ankle from when she fell off her bike in college. If he cared enough to ask. I wasn't angry. Not really. Anger requires energy. What I felt was weight. Like I was walking through water, slow and cold and thick. Like everything in our house, the books on the shelf, the framed photo from our trip to Asheville, the mug she gave me on our 3rd anniversary, had become props in a story I didn't believe anymore. That afternoon, I did something I never thought I would. I logged into her laptop. It wasn't locked. Never had been. We used to say we had nothing to hide. But now, it felt like walking into a room where I wasn't supposed to be, sacred and stained all at once. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe I wanted to be wrong. Maybe I hoped I'd find receipts for a group dinner. Or emails about a work event. Something that would pull me back from the edge. Instead, I found a folder labeled Q3 Concepts. Inside, buried between actual pitch decks and digital mood boards, was a PDF labeled m_d_notes.pdf. At first, I thought it was work-related, but when I opened it, I froze. It wasn't about work. It was a stream of short entries, little paragraphs, notes, reflections, thoughts, things he'd written, apparently for her. Maybe she asked him to. Maybe he did it on his own. But they were intimate. Not dirty. No, that would have been easier, in a way. They were personal. Like someone trying to stitch themselves into her thoughts. One line said, "You deserve to feel seen every single day, not just on Thursdays." And that was the part that broke me. Because I used to say things like that. In different words, maybe. But that was the heart of it. That was what our entire marriage was built on, my quiet promise to never let her disappear inside her own life. But now, someone else had taken that vow. And she let him. I didn't print anything. I didn't forward the file. I just stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Then I closed the laptop, wiped the trackpad like I hadn't touched it, and sat there for a long time, hands in my lap, feeling like a man who had just read the final chapter of a book he never wanted to end. That night, when she got home, I was already in bed. She slipped in beside me like everything was normal. I waited until the lights were out. Then I whispered the only thing I could think to say. "Do you feel seen?" She didn't answer. I'm not sure she even understood the question. But in that silence, I got mine. The next morning, she made pancakes. She never made pancakes during the week. She stood in the kitchen flipping them like it was any Saturday from our old life, humming to herself, barefoot, robe tied loose at the waist. The smell was warm and familiar, and for a moment, I almost let it fool me. I almost convinced myself that things could be ordinary again if we both just pretended hard enough. But ordinary was gone. Ordinary had a timestamp, and it expired somewhere between her hotel visit and the file named after her lover's initials. She slid a plate in front of me with a little grin, the kind that used to make me feel like I was in on something special. Now, it felt like she was smiling at a role I hadn't realized I was still playing. I watched the syrup pool around the edges of the pancake and didn't pick up my fork. "You okay?" she asked, tone casual but eyes alert. I looked up. Why wouldn't I be? She tilted her head, waiting. "You're quiet." "I've always been quiet." "That's not what I mean. I wanted to say so many things. I saw you. I know about the hotel. I read what he wrote. But what stopped me wasn't fear of confrontation. It was that sinking feeling that the truth wouldn't do anything, that it wouldn't change her choices, that she might admit it with the same calm tone she used when she told me we were out of almond milk, a shrug, an apology without weight. So I said nothing. I just pushed the plate slightly forward, stood up, and went to the sink. She didn't ask why I wasn't hungry. By the time I got to work, my stomach was in knots. I kept thinking about that file, about the way he phrased things. Like he knew me. Like he had mapped out exactly what I wasn't giving her. And maybe he had. Maybe she told him everything I failed to see. I tried to imagine what their conversations sounded like. Did she vent about me? Did she describe me as cold, distant, a man too small for her world? Did she tell him that I loved her? That I'd always loved her? Probably not. In the middle of the day, she sent me a message. "Thinking about you. Sorry if I seemed off. Want to go for dinner tomorrow?" The message wasn't cruel. It wasn't defensive. It sounded like someone extending a rope across a canyon, hoping it might hold. But it didn't feel real. Not after what I'd seen. It felt like an act, like she was trying to get ahead of something, or soothe a suspicion she sensed but didn't want to confront head-on. I replied, "Sure." Because I needed time. Because I wasn't ready to walk away. Because part of me, the oldest part, still believed she might stop before the damage became irreversible. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I told her I fell asleep on the couch while watching a documentary. She didn't push. Maybe she was relieved. Maybe the distance gave her room to breathe. Or maybe she just didn't care enough to ask why I was disappearing. The next day, I made a decision I never thought I'd make. I reached out to someone else. Someone neutral. Her sister, Meredith. Now, I've never been close to Meredith. She's blunt, fiercely loyal to Sabrina, and never liked how quiet I was. But I didn't go to her for advice. I went to her for truth. For a different angle. For a reality check from someone who knew my wife longer than I did. We met for coffee on the edge of the city, at a bookstore cafe no one from her circle would recognize. She was already there when I arrived, sipping something with oat milk and scrolling through emails. When she saw me, her face shifted, guarded, skeptical. "This is a surprise," she said. "Everything okay?" "Not really," I said, sitting down. She watched me. Waited. "I think she's seeing someone," I said. "And I think it's been happening for a while." She didn't flinch. She didn't gasp. She didn't even blink. She just took another sip of her drink and set it down with an unnerving calm. "I was wondering how long it would take," she said. I froze. "What?" Meredith leaned back, arms crossed. "Look, I'm not saying I know everything, but I know my sister. And lately, she's been different. Why didn't you say anything?" She raised an eyebrow. What was I supposed to do? Accuse her without proof? Ruin your marriage just to be right? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "She talks about you like you're this soft landing," Meredith said, almost gently. "Someone safe. Comfortable. But I think she's been craving something else. Some kind of spark." I felt like I'd been punched. Because she was right. That was me. I was the soft place. The familiar. "You knew," I said quietly. "I suspected," she corrected. "But I didn't want it to be true. You're a good man, Lowell. Maybe too good." I stared down at the table, hands curled around my cup like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. "Do you think she'll stop?" I asked. Meredith sighed. "Honestly, I don't think she even knows she's doing it. She's living two lives and hoping neither collapses. And you've always been the easier one not to lose." I didn't reply. What could I say? She was right. Sabrina was gambling on my silence. On my softness. On the fact that I wouldn't blow up our life. And so far, she was winning. That night, I didn't confront her. Instead, I took a walk. Just around the block. Slow, thoughtful, The way you do when you need to delay a decision. The air was cool, the kind of cool that makes your skin tighten but clears your head. When I got back, she was home, sitting in the living room with a glass of wine and a playlist she called Reset. She looked up and smiled. "You okay?" she asked again. And I nodded, because the truth wasn't ready yet. But it was coming. And this time, I wouldn't let it pass me by. The next morning, the quiet was unbearable. Not loud. Not tense. Just unbearably still. She moved through the kitchen like it was any other day, toasting bread, sipping from her thermos, flipping through emails like the woman I used to know hadn't become someone I could no longer recognize. But I noticed everything. The way she kept glancing at the clock. The way her phone stayed face down, just far enough away from her that it wouldn't vibrate against her thigh. The way she didn't meet my eyes once, not even when she handed me my coffee like she always did. No sugar, too hot, the way I like it. That was the most twisted part. The routines were still there, as if she wanted the house to feel unchanged, even though everything inside it had quietly died. The dinner she invited me to was that night. I should have said no. I should have told her I knew. I should have asked her straight out, "Why are you still coming home to me while your heart is clearly somewhere else?" But instead, I got in the car. I dressed in the same shirt I wore to our engagement photos years ago, not because I expected it to matter to her, but because I wanted to remember who I had been. A man who once thought love meant devotion, and devotion meant permanence. I needed to carry that version of myself one more time before I finally let him go. The restaurant she chose was quiet, expensive, filled with soft music and soft lighting. A place where conversations were meant to feel intimate, not interrogative. She had a reservation. Of course she did. She always planned. Always anticipated. I wonder if she had anticipated this. If she could feel the weight behind my silence as we sat down, menus in front of us, neither of us really looking. "Thanks for coming," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I've missed this." I said nothing at first. Just let the words float across the table and land where they may. I studied her like a stranger might, someone trying to guess if this woman was happy or just good at pretending to be. Her smile was warm, but off-center. Her eyes were bright, but flickering. She looked like someone who was trying to convince both of us that this dinner meant something more than it did. When the waiter came, she ordered wine. I asked for water. The first course came, beet salad, her favorite, and she took one bite before setting down her fork and folding her hands, looking at me the way someone looks when they've rehearsed an apology but aren't sure when to begin. "I know you've been distant," she said, "and I don't blame you. I've been overwhelmed. I've been pushing myself. I've been distracted." "Distracted?" I echoed. "Is that what we're calling it?" She blinked. Caught. "I don't want to fight," she said softly. "I'm not fighting," I replied. "I'm just tired of pretending this is fine." She looked down at her lap, then back up at me. "Lowell, I know I've made mistakes, but I've been trying to fix them. That's why I wanted tonight. To reconnect." I stared at her for a long moment, then leaned in slightly, my voice low but steady. "I saw you. At the hotel." Her breath hitched. Just slightly. Not dramatic. Not theatrical. But real. I didn't say anything else. I didn't explain. I didn't accuse. I just let the words hang in the air like smoke. She stared at me, eyes wide. And for once, she didn't have the right lie ready. "I don't know what you think you saw," she finally said, reaching for the safe space between denial and deflection. "I saw enough," I said. "Enough to know that what we have isn't real anymore. That I've been here, showing up every day, holding on to something you already walked away from." Tears welled in her eyes, not immediately, but slowly, like she was finally realizing that something she thought was permanent was slipping beyond her reach. She didn't try to speak right away. Maybe because she knew anything she said would only sound like strategy. "Is this it?" she whispered. "Are you leaving?" I shook my head. "No, I'm not leaving." Hope flickered in her face for a fraction of a second. "You are," I said, calmly. Her face crumpled in confusion. "What?" "You don't get to stay here and pretend this never happened," I said. "You don't get to treat me like a soft place to land while you're chasing sparks with someone who writes you love letters in PDF format." She froze. I watched her crumble in phases, first her shoulders, then her eyes, then her mouth. For the first time in this entire unraveling, she looked afraid. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. "I know," I replied. "But you did. And you kept doing it." I was lost. "No," I said. "You were selfish. And I let you be, because I thought love meant staying even when it hurt." She looked down again, hand shaking as she reached for the wine glass she hadn't touched. Her lip quivered. Her mouth opened. But there was nothing left to say. I'm not angry, I said. And I'm not here to ruin your life. But I'm done being the person you betray with silence and keep around with small kindnesses. She nodded once. Then again, faster. Like she was trying to accept a reality she hadn't expected to come so quickly. We didn't eat. We didn't order dessert. We left the restaurant together in silence. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe. Not because it was over, but because I had stopped lying to myself about what it had become. She didn't say much on the drive home. Neither did I. The city lights washed over the windshield like a quiet apology for everything we'd just left behind. She kept glancing out the passenger window, fingers twitching in her lap, like she wanted to grab hold of something, a moment, a reason, anything to anchor her to a life she now realized wasn't on solid ground. When we pulled into the driveway, she didn't move. Just sat there staring at the darkened outline of the house we'd once called ours. I didn't think it would go this far, she whispered, almost to herself. I nodded, my voice low. It always goes this far. You just don't see it until you've crossed something you can't uncross. She opened her mouth to say something. I didn't need to hear it. Some apologies come too late, not because they're false, but because they arrive after too many quiet betrayals. I didn't need her guilt. I didn't want her promises. I just wanted space. Real, quiet space where I could finally hear my own voice again. I let her go inside first. Then I followed, not out of obligation, but because it was still my home too. For now. Over the next week, we began the slow, silent undoing of a shared life. She moved in with her sister while she figured things out. I didn't ask questions. I didn't chase closure. Some things are meant to end without a grand finale. We didn't scream. We didn't break plates or slam doors. We just stopped pretending. And in that space, something unexpected happened. I found myself again. Not in some dramatic, movie-style way, but slowly, quietly. I started waking up early, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I began running again, not to escape anything, but to feel something. I called old friends I'd neglected, took long drives with no destination, and stood in silence without feeling like it meant I was weak or lost. One morning, I passed the mirror on my way to make coffee, same black, no sugar, and I stopped. Not because I looked different, but because I recognized the man staring back at me. For the first time in what felt like years, he looked grounded. Not bitter. Not broken. Just free. Weeks turned into months. Sabrina and I spoke occasionally, gently, with the kind of distance that says we both cared, just not enough to rebuild what was gone. She eventually admitted everything. The affair, the lies, even the way she tried to compartmentalize me like a safety net she didn't think she'd ever really lose. She cried. I listened. And then we let go. Not in anger, but in peace. One Saturday afternoon, I packed the last box from our house and dropped the keys off at the leasing office. I wasn't going far, just a quiet place across town with a little porch and a view of trees instead of concrete. As I walked through the empty rooms one last time, I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel grief. I felt light. Like I had been carrying something for so long I forgot how heavy it was, until I finally set it down. And now? Now I'm okay. Better than okay. I'm rebuilding, slowly, patiently, with more honesty than I ever gave myself when I was busy keeping a broken marriage upright. The truth is, we don't always get to control who stays in our lives. But we do get to choose who we become after they leave. And I chose to become someone who doesn't live in silence anymore. Someone who speaks up, even if his voice shakes. Someone who knows his worth, even when someone else forgets to see it. That's the man I am now. And I like him.